Hello, everyone. This week, I want to talk about the new setup that I created for making a pitchable pair of solar panels. Now, if you go out and buy what I did for the first set, which are getting progressively harder to find, they get expensive now because they are hard to find. And the goal of those units was to sit on top of a vehicle roof, such as an RV. And when you got to where you were going to go, you'd set the panels up. All right, so the bottom runners would be on your roof. The pivot point would be at the roof, and the arms would hold it up. Now, the problem that I've got is the weight of the panels are at the top, right? Because that's where the pivot point is. And I wasn't really happy with what the package provided to hold it into place. Now, while I've got one of those up, I kind of wonder how long it's going to hold up. So, looking at that, and also trying to find a way to create something that's easy for anybody to just go get off the shelf, right? So, looking at what came with the other kit, it was basically angled, punched metal, right? And a couple of arms that were flat, punched metal. The problem that I had finding things is getting the holes to line up. Now, I wanted the 4 panels to be locked completely together. The first configuration I did exactly that. What I did was I used an angled metal, punched metal for the top and bottom of a pair of panels. Now, my panels are 23 inches wide, if they're in portrait format, and 38 inches high. So as I was putting them in landscape format, they would need to have something that's 76 inches long, which I couldn't find at the time. So it was something a little smaller, but centered the panels so that it covered most of the panels. Put that top and bottom of the first 2 panels, and then did the same for the second set of panels. So now I got these 2 framed panels. Then I took another pair, put them on the outside edges, because the back part that's going to pivot it is already going to be all the way from top to bottom. So I didn't have to worry about the edges quite so much, but I hooked them together anyway. I have a tendency to over-engineer things. But looking at what that was like, trying to haul that up into position, because again, remember, my panels are mounted flat so that the horizon is directly pointing to them. So they're up and down as far as ground is concerned. They're at 90 degrees. With the goal being you would swing them up to what they need to be depending upon the time of the year. So during the summer, they would be almost horizontal, not quite, but they'd be much more horizontal than they are going to be in winter, for example. So as I was looking around at things, I realized all I needed was these angle metalled, punched metal things to make framing. Now, I will let you know that there's a little work that has to be done with the ones that I found, and that is that you've got to punch out the tops a little bit to make sure the pins go through. More on that in a minute. So what you're going to do, and this makes it easier to put up, especially if you're by yourself, is you're going to lay down the 2 back pieces, right? Those two long pieces that are going to be used to pivot this, allow it to swing. To that, you're going to attach a top piece, two middle pieces, and a bottom piece if you want to put the 4 panels together like I did. Again, having the same setup that I had before, I would need to have 76 inches wide, but I didn't have that. So, in addition, where I was putting it, if I put them in that landscape format, they were going to go too far over into the stairwell. So these are portrait. The same idea applies here, but we'll do is if I put the panels side by side. So the same thing that I did by hooking the panels together with those top and bottom pieces, you can now put to the frame. So you can build out your frame of how you want everything to look. And you can attach the frame. The frame is a lot lighter than the same frame with the 4 panels in it. Now you might be thinking, okay, now that I've got the frame in place and it's hanging out, it's hanging vertically, how do I put the panels in place? That's the easy part. Because now you don't have all that weight to worry about. You just have one panel to put in at a time. So putting a strap, like a ratchet strap, making it a little loose, you can put a panel in place, put that strap around it, pull it tight, and now one person can not only put this entire frame up, but can put each of the panels in, hook the panels up, and hook the panels together. So it becomes a one-man operation. But the question becomes, what am I using for a pivot point? So again, going back to what I purchased, it was this long angled punched metal that went top to bottom. I put it against the 4x4. So that went against the 4x4. Another identical one went down the back of the panels. But that's overkill for what I want to do because I don't care about that holdout point, the mounting points that push it out and lock it into place. Explain why in a minute. So I was looking for something that I could attach to the 4x4s that would allow me to put a pin in place. And I found that garage hinges, all right, they're an overlapping piece of metal with a metal tube in it, should be strong enough to hold the panel up without any problem. And then I found pins that are used for tractors when they're pulling carts. You drop the pin in place to hold the cart, right? So they have to be strong. So the garage hinge had to be painted because it's meant to be inside. So I spray painted that to make sure it wouldn't rust. Spray painted the framework so it doesn't rust as well. And the pins are already chromed. Now, the nice part about these pins is they have a cotter pin situation to them. So once you push the pin through your frame, through the hinge, you just drop the cotter pin in place and it's not going to go anywhere. And that's what I got on both sides. Now, the Life Hacks and Stuff website, which I will put a link in the show notes for, has pictures of what this all looks like. Again, if you think about it, the one that I have just has a cross piece at the very top and a cross piece almost to the bottom. Doesn't quite all the way go to the bottom. Now, when you're designing it, if you're going to do a 4-piece, right, you want something that's going to cover most, if not all, of the distance. Make sure that your holes are going to line up. Now, there's one thing to keep in mind, though. With what I did, I am not going to have those arms to lock it into place. I'm putting an actuator at the bottom. That actuator is going to be what holds the panels at the right angle. I don't need those side pieces for this. The actuator is good for 330 pounds, so I'm not going to worry about it for this set of panels. Now, if I were to put the 4 panels together, I might double that up and put one on either side, but I just have the 2 panels. I'm going right down the middle. Now, because I'm going to do that, at the bottom of it, I have a gap between the 2 panels, and in that gap, I can bolt in the foot for the actuator. Now, when I did the other set of 4 panels, I couldn't do that. However, because the panels didn't go down to that last notch in the frame, I could put another cross piece in there. I used, again, a punched angle because I wanted that extra strength. Put that along the bottom, and now I can bolt in the foot into that cross piece. So that one's dead centered on a separate piece at the bottom, but this one is going to be right between the 2 panels. And that's going to allow me to, by giving it electricity and hitting a button, move that panel to whatever angle this is going to allow. Now, there is a limit on the range, so you have to figure out how far it has to be. The most I can do is 36 inches. It's an 18-inch throw with an 18-inch back. So I can't go below wherever I put it, that angle for 18 inches, and I can't go beyond the 36. So I'll worry about most likely more summer than I am winter. Although technically I should be worried more about it in the winter than I am in the summer, so that I catch as much light as possible, because the summer is going to be pumping in a lot more power than the winter is going to be. But the distance between those two isn't as great, so I don't think I'm going to have too much of a difficulty once I get this in place. I do not have the actuator in place for this one yet, so I haven't spec'd out where it all has to go. Actuator requires 2 feet. 1 foot connects to what you're pushing out, and the other foot connects to a base. So once I've got that in place, it's going to push in and out. The entire frame is steel. The pins are steel and they're chromed. And the hinge is steel. All between 14 and 18 gauge steel for all the pieces. So this should hold up, I think, a lot better than the other setup that I got. Very tempting to me to just swap out the other one at this point, but we'll see how it goes. I could be wrong. I have to realign it just a little bit. It's down about a degree to one side because I had problem putting it up with those 4 panels all in place. Doing this frame situation, all you have to do is lift up the frame. If you're just doing the 4 panels, you just have a 2-piece frame, right? 2-piece back, 2-piece top and bottom. So those 4 pieces bolted together and you're good to go. If you're going to be doing the 4 panels, then you're going to add 2 more pieces in the middle as a cross piece. So if you were to look at it, it looks like you've got channels to slide the panels in. You don't really, and don't slide them in because you've got your bolts already in place and they're going to be in the way. That's one thing to keep in mind if you're going to be putting it on something that's going to be, once you put things in place, look at where your bolts are going to be to decide if you want to put your panels in such a way that those bolts are clear. By having the 2 portraits, I had plenty of room to keep the panels between those 2 bolts and still leave myself a channel in between. If you're going portrait, you're going to want to look at a couple of things. How long do those top and bottom pieces have to be? Again, for me, it would have been 76 inches. How far apart are the holes? Because you're going to want to get a piece of punched, angled steel that has those holes where they need to be. Mine were a little off, and that's the problem I've had with this punch steel before. Now, you don't have to bolt it into place. You could use like zip ties and things like that to hold it in place, because you're not looking at a lot of, nothing's pushing against it, right? Even if the wind comes along, it's not going to be that great against where I've got it. So you could get away with zip ties. I like to use bolts. But in either event, once you get them in place and you figured out how long a bar you have to have across top and bottom, then it's easy to put them together. The other thing to do, if you can't find a good set of bars for it, is, of course, to create your own. And by that, what I mean is, if you were to take a shorter piece, so let's say I have a panel that's 38 inches, and I am able to find a 40-inch piece of metal. Right? If I put a 40-inch piece of metal into a frame, I'll be able to do 2 landscape pieces. But if I take that outside edge, right, that it's an angled piece on the outside, and I do the same thing for another set, I can then bolt those 2 frames together. And now I have 2 40-inch by, in my case, it would have to be about 50 inches down. So I have 2 40 by 50s. That would give me a gap between the 2 panels that's bolted together. And the panels could then work as one. So I'd only have to have those 2 outside pivot points. I wouldn't need a center pivot point. I would just need the 2 outsides. However, you still got to worry about that foot. So having those 2 together like that, you're still going to have to figure a way to put a piece in there at the bottom. And it could just be a small platform. It just gives you something to hook the foot to allow it to push the entire unit back and forth. So again, same concept. 2 frames bolted together at the center point, but built out exactly the same way that I did here. So go over to Life Hacks and Stuff site, and you'll be able to see there visually what I'm talking about. I've got pictures of the hinge, the pin with the cottering pin in it, the panel as it looks from the front, and the panel as it looks from the back. And you can see the wiring, and you can see the framing from the back of it, and you can see that it's pretty much non-existent from the front. I do have a little extra off to the side. I didn't have a way of cutting the frame, so there's a little hanging off to the side on one side for right now. And again, it doesn't have the actuator in place. But this will give you guys an idea of what it looks like to just frame this up. Again, you're just lifting these frames into place, popping those pins onto both sides. So you just need to hold the frame up, pop the pin in on both sides, and you're good to go. I used I think it was a 5/16 drill, but depends on what the pins are that you use. But the pins that I got and the garage frames all worked perfectly together. They were all just the right size to allow everything to slide in. The pins are a little bit longer than they need to be. So the only problem with the configuration that I've got right now is if it slides one way or the other, it has the possibility of binding. But once I've got the actuator in the bottom part, that'll be less of an issue, because it'll have a locked point in the center, and I won't have to worry about it. But that's what I got for you guys this week, and I will talk to you all next week.